Welcome to season 3 of the Boss It podcast. As I mentioned previously, season 3 is much more talking to senior executives, founders, CEOs within the software sector, finding out about their experiences, what are their background, but particularly what are the hurdles that they've had to overcome, what are the opportunities they see in the market, but also speaking to some really interesting people who have got some interesting knowledge and experience that I think all of you will find very interesting and maybe useful. And today definitely is not without exception. I've been doing a lot of work. Since COVID time, I've probably been busier than ever talking to a lot of software companies with various projects that I've been working on. And without doubt, one of the key themes there that keeps cropping up time and time again is about artificial intelligence, machine learning, the implications of that. I've spoken to a lot of companies. Some have some experience in that. Some are just at the beginning of their journey in that area. And some, I would say that their marketing is probably ahead of their technical capabilities. And that's quite prevalent as well. So today I'm going to introduce to you Luca Marchesotti, who has really relevant background and experience for this conversation. He is CEO of Sparked. He's had 38 signed patents. He's written 35 research that have been peer-reviewed papers. Previously worked for Xerox as a senior scientist, got a PhD, and has a lot of experience here that I think that will be very well. So, hello, Luca. Thank you for coming on to Boss It.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for the invitation. Really excited to be here today.
From our previous conversations and then just looking up your profile, there's so much that we could cover here that we could probably do several podcasts. But give people a quick elevator pitch about you and Spark, just to start the conversation off.
Sure. Well, listen, Spark is an AI company based in Dublin, Ireland, so not very far away from you guys. And, we work with businesses of all size, from multinational to startups. Essentially, we do three things. And these are, it's important to say that AI is market, despite all the buzz, is still at a very nascent state, very fragmented.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people that do software as a service, and that's also what we do. But we also build custom AI solutions using these, backbone, these software as a service that we might explain and cover a little bit more later. I say this is essential because there are so many different use cases and there are so many nuanced problems that, this custom built solution is, a very important piece of our offering. Now, obviously, we also do end-to-end support. So there are companies that already have our machine learning models. They need maintenance, they need improvements. This space is moving so fast that, on a monthly basis, there are new algorithms, and the performance can improve double digit. And our clients and our customers require and need these kind of updates and patches. Our specialty is computer vision, which is AI for images and videos. This is, again, one of the areas where AI has grown, very rapidly, especially in the last couple of years. And we're very proud of being part of this market and this community. So I can go on, discussing about all the use cases and all the clients that we serve in fintech, manufacturing, or sport tech, but I will stop here. Yeah.
Yes. One of the things that perhaps we can talk about later on, which I was quite intrigued by, because it's AI and machine learning, image recognition, but you said specializing also in image aesthetics. And that's something I'd like to sort of touch upon. But I've noticed that you'd been involved with some work around video surveillance and motion detection. I've come across that a few times before. I'd like to have a discussion with you. Was that primarily around used for security? Because I know that's one of the big uses.
That's, it reminds me of when I was young, when I was still an undergrad in London, and I did my master thesis actually in video surveillance. It was 2001 actually when I started my thesis. And as you might recall, 2001 was a very specific year in the history of the world, and the market for video surveillance skyrocketed after obviously on September the 11th. There was an awful lot of funding, and at that point there was no artificial intelligence. It was just cameras attached to an alert panel saying, hey, there is a problem there. 20 years passed, the problems are still there. So monitoring large spaces for detecting anomalous activities or for alerting the right people about something interesting happening in a certain area. We have seen abuses of this technology. To be honest, honest, video surveillance now has a very negative connotation. We've seen in particular regions of the world like China, where computer vision and video surveillance have been used against their own people to detect certain ethnicities or to prevent certain people to do certain things. So it is an interesting space. It is a space where regulator still hasn't come up with a very specific laws and, trying to put some order. So it's still a very hard space to comment on.
It's an unregulated area at the moment. It's sort of a bit of the Wild West, as you tend to get in the early days. Because I remember probably about that time that there was work going on to monitor potentially for terrorists, which was based upon the movement of individuals, being able to scan and see their movement. And there were certain patterns that would create an alert, so that then somebody could then view that person for the police or security services. Were you working in a similar sort of area? Was that the intention?
Yeah, I mean, I was working at that point, I was working with universities. I was doing a PhD, so it was still, government funded or EU funded. There were no such applications yet in the market. Now with body cameras, with, companies that are developing really specific and bespoke solutions, those solutions are already in police stations, in police cars have cameras built in, and they are constantly scanning for license plates, and these license plates are then geolocated and put into a database. So to some extent, that promise of mass surveillance or mass security is there, but still far away from the initial expectations.
I think whenever you discuss about artificial intelligence and machine learning, there is probably equal levels of excitement, but also trepidation in all of these different areas, whether that be surveillance in this case and sort of spying on people and it being used in the wrong way, or the idea that it's just going to replace people in their jobs. I mean, talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning in that wider context, how do you view this? Because that's your area. And there is cynicism, there's excitement, and there's hype. And I want to sort of steer that conversation and sort of cover those areas.
I can bring up good news to you and to your audience. I think we are out of the hype phase, which is, in my humble opinion, the silly one. Okay.
Yes.
The one where, you spend a lot of time and you waste it. So we are out of that phase. I think the danger is to enter into the cynicism phase because, a lot of people have seen how, the big four, the big companies have been profiting massively from AI. I'm talking about the usual Facebook, Google, maybe Apple to some extent, but, I would just, highlight the ones like Facebook that really milked the AI applied to big data, because that's really the way to monetize for the moment. So we have this ambition to inject AI in every product and in every solution you can think of, but it's very complicated. And the challenge, believe me, it's not a technical one. It's a much more complicated. It touches so many different areas of, like for instance, human psychology, privacy, regulators, law enforcement. And, these are not problems that an engineer like me can solve. Okay. So it's much broader and much more complicated. And this is called the reality phase, in my opinion.
Yes. No, I would agree that. I think that the hype phase, by and large, has moved away, which I think is a good thing. And we now are starting to understand its potential implications and the breadth of those applications. And I think that really is enormous. That's quite something to get your head around. Every human interaction that we could think about potentially could be affected by AI in a very positive way.
And let me tell you a story, a very quick one.
Sure.
And this is an example of when things go badly and when engineers don't talk to other people and they just stay in their own bubble. I think in 2018, there was a big scandal in Finland. There was a company that had a great idea. They said, look, we want to democratize access to psychologists, and we want to, do our part to contribute to mental health improvement. And they created this platform for psychologists, and you could, book your own therapy session with no friction through their platform, and then receive, one-to-one consultation online. Guess what? These engineers designed the system so that psychologists could input their notes about, a lot of people. We're talking about thousands of patients.
Yes.
They got hacked. The hackers then ransomware more than 20,000 people in Finland. And you can imagine, the kind of edge that they could have on those people. So it was a massive tragedy, on a big scale. And this is where you start with a very good aim and then ending up in a very bad place because of incompetence, because of negligence, because you didn't understand the implication of the technologies that you were delivering. And with AI, multiply that risk by an order of magnitude.
Yes, and that is dangerous because that can be associated with an area of technology that can do a lot of good.
Exactly.
Unfairly in many regards, because whatever area of business, it can always be used to the wrong intent and to harm, or people can make mistakes, but it doesn't make the technology evil in any respect. One of the things that I've noticed is that people tend to talk about the innovations that's being made by the very large companies, Google and Amazon and so on.
Mm-hmm.
My own experience generally with technology is it tends to be the smaller companies that gather together a group of really knowledgeable people that can move very quickly. They tend to lead in innovation because they've got that agility. And in my conversations, in actually talking to a wide range of people over the last 2 years, a lot of the most exciting innovation and breakthroughs are coming from some of these smaller companies. What's your own view about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at the history of machine learning, for instance, it all started with Geoff Hinton in Toronto, and he was a professor. They made a professor in Toronto University. They made a small company. That company was acquired by Google, and then all the rest is in the history books of machine learning. I can give you like other 10 or 20 examples of small companies that are that are promoting novel ideas, and then they get acquired, and then they kind of exhaust their innovation.
Yes. Their drive and their energy and the innovation seems to be dissipated throughout the much larger organization. They get consumed, don't they? And I've seen that. I mean, not just in this particular area that we're talking about, but in other areas when some of the giant companies can acquire them. I think, from my perspective on the M&A, I think that a lot of companies have learned from that. And you can see that with some of the large companies such as IBM, who've actually made successful some very small acquisitions and made them very profitable and very valuable to the whole. But I think it can, because I suppose it's a bit like a sports team. You get a football team and they perform at a very high level because they have skills, but also because they get on well as a team. They've created a unit. And I think that's an important aspect. And that's where we can see some of these smaller organizations. And I'm assuming, you've got a tight team of people that you know very well, their strengths and weaknesses, and as a consequence can be very effective when you're working on projects.
Yeah, look, I think absolutely, Mark. And I think that, smaller entities, small organizations have a different mindset and a different setup, but more importantly, they have a different dynamic. They function in a different way, and they have different drivers. Okay, obviously, there are examples, and I have one in mind that I will share, where a small company is acquired by a bigger one and still retains that that strength, that power of innovation, that agility and willingness to innovate. And that example is DeepMind. It was acquired, I think, 5 years ago by Google for $500 million. They're based in London, and they're doing amazing things, amazing, and they don't stop. They have exactly the same kind of output that they had when they were acquired. Impressive.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about your history. So after, because you've studied at Geneva, Glasgow, Kingston, but after you made that sort of step, say for instance, after you were doing the work in video surveillance, what was the next significant sort of step for you? Where did you go next?
Well, it actually, everything fell into places quite naturally. Like it was, I didn't really know what AI was in 2001. Okay. And, but I was very interested in new things, and AI and machine learning were starting to, populate the the sessions in conferences, like for instance, CVPR or NIPS, and it was my instinct that brought me there. Then I found a job as a researcher in Xerox Labs in France. I'm Italian, and I also had a legacy with France, and I thought it was a great move, going away from university and academia, because you can learn a lot in academia, but there's also there's the big question mark. It's the so what question mark, I call it. I spent a lot of time writing amazingly interesting papers that really nobody cared about, but they're very interesting.
I'm sure someone did. Send them to me, Luca. I'll care about them.
Yeah, what I'm talking about here is that research it's amazing, and I still wake up in the morning at least once a month saying, shit, I'd love to go back and do it. Okay. Yes. What I do now, it's in some sense, it's more exciting because you have clients shouting and say, your model doesn't work. You told me that you could, translate this image into a 3D model, and now my clients are upset. Why did you say that? So you have this immediate feedback, okay? And yes. I'm the kind of guy that needs that immediate sort of ongoing feedback to improve and to focus on what matters the most, because that's important to me.
Yeah. So take that knowledge, which you would have gained through doing that research, but actually turn it into a practical solution, put it into the real world. I can understand that. No, that's a good point. And then when did you start Sparked?
Well, I started it actually in the middle of the pandemics in 2020 because I saw an opportunity, and more importantly, because it was such a bad time for me and for the rest of the world, that I said I need to try something new. I need to do my part. Yes. I need to do something, and that's what I know to do. I know machine learning, I know technology. That was my contribution, and again, it was a big risk because yes. I could have gone for a corporate job, and I said no way. Let's try to create jobs, okay, as opposed to find a pay slip.
Yes. And one of the things that stuck in my mind, I think, from the very first conversation that I had with you, was when you were explaining about Sparked. I thought initially that you were positioning yourself as an AI consultant. And although you said that you do get involved in consultancy, actually, that's not your main aim. You want to get in there and you want to work with, typically, it could be software companies actually adding to their technology, or could be large corporates in going in and creating something. And that's what I really like. That really stuck in my mind. So tell me a little bit about that, because I think it sounded as though sometimes you may have your first engagement where there's some consultancy to have a look at the problem and where they currently are, and whether AI is the right route. But then you will actually come in with your team and create the module that can be added into that solution.
Sure. Mark, listen, despite everything that is said, we still believe, and by we, I mean people in this industry, we still believe that self-service AI, AI on, as a service that you can inject into your solutions and products with a few lines of code is, for the moment, and I'm not saying in the longer term, but for the moment is just a dream, okay? It simply doesn't work. And it doesn't work for a very specific reason, because the use cases are so different and so nuanced that it's really a dream to believe that you can nail that specific problem with an off-the-shelf solution. There is always going to be a piece of setup or a custom training that is going to be required to make that specific technology able to solve a specific problem, okay? And this is why, we are not shy to, take a customer that doesn't have a clear idea on how to do AI and guide it through that solution. I mean, our job is to make products, software products, better with AI. And there is only one way that I know to do that, which is, taking a software that is already out there, for instance, our AI, our computer vision solutions, and configure them to be able to solve the problems of our customers.
Mm. We mentioned, because I mean, my background was very much in the area of document management, image capture, image recognition, OCR. So I was attracted when I saw about image recognition, but also this term, image aesthetics. Tell me about that.
Look, I think in 2012, I published a paper that actually had very good reviews and a lot of citations, and it was about this new problem that we kind of came up with in Xerox, which was about images, the aesthetics of images. So the problem that we were trying to solve back in 2010, 2012 was this one. Given an image, is a machine or an algorithm able to tell if this image is going to be perceived as a good image or a bad image? Or in other words, if it is an aesthetically pleasing image or considered as an aesthetically pleasing image for the majority of people or not? Okay, so this was our original, how we casted that problem.
Wow, that sounds tough. I'm a photographer, so I sort of very much relate to that, and being able to say which is the most pleasing of these images from a group. I mean, how did you go about that? I know that there have been various studies that have been done over the years in getting large groups of people to look at works of art and to be able to track where their eyes move across the image. And from that, they made a number of assumptions about subject, placement of subject, about composition. What were you using as the sort of the fundamentals to be able to do that?
Well, great question, Mark. Well, we were, and we still are machine learning nuts, if you want. And our approach was a completely data-driven approach. In a sense, what we did was, I mean, the assumption that we made was, if you have a large enough amount of data, and I will explain what I mean by data later, you're going to be able to teach a machine what a good image looks like. Okay, so a completely data-driven, AI-driven approach.
Wow, that's a big claim.
And to some extent it worked, because if you think about it, now we have the data. You know, 2010 there were already databases with this kind of labels and images. But think about, for instance, Tinder. Okay, that Tinder is a good example, because when Tinder users swipe right or left, they express a judgment. Okay, and they express a judgment based on aesthetic features, because they look the face of the person on that app, and then they say with the movement of their thumb whether or not that they like what they see. Okay. Yes. If you take that movement as your labels, okay, expressing a positive or negative feedback against the aesthetics of that face, then you can train a machine learning model to, you know, at least recommend people that look like the ones that you have positively scored. That was exactly the idea behind that work back in 2010.
Ah, okay. Yes, I do remember that there were some studies done looking at people's faces, and they found that the people who had the greatest degree of symmetry were perceived as being more attractive, and that would be part of that data, I guess, or the output of it.
Correct. Okay. And you know, the algorithms implicitly learn those heuristics.
Okay. Let's talk about some other areas, because with my own background in working with a number of companies in the area of document management, OCR in the early days, but then looking more about document recognition and being able to gather data, particularly in the early stages, scanning a hard copy document and then being able to extract that data. But that's something that's still happening in the digital world. Is that an area that you've done a lot of work?
Yes, in the early days in Xerox, I think Xerox acquired a company called Amiki a long time ago in 2008, 2009. It was a legal technology company. And already at that time, we were heavily working on document analysis. There was a technology called word spotting, and this was interesting. And to some extent, what we're doing now is still falling under that umbrella of technologies. So instead of using OCR, the idea is to interpret the document as an image, okay, and detect patterns or spotting specific words or keywords. Like for instance, I don't know, let's say mortgage. Okay, it's a keyword. It could be handwritten. It could be typed. Whatever. So you learn that pattern of pixels, that visual pattern, and then you recognize the entire word. Okay, so this is an alternative approach to standard OCR. It is already used. It is in the market with some success, and this is what our technology is all about, actually, when it comes to document analysis.
Some time ago, I did a podcast with John Taylor, who's the CEO at Action AI, and one of the things that they are very much having a sort of a much more of a focus on is around, I suppose, conversational AI chatbots. Have you done any work in that area? Is that something that you've been involved with?
Yes. I did a couple of projects on conversational AI. I think the challenge there is to understand how to create good data sets, because it's a very tough problem, very tough problem, interacting with a human as if the algorithm was a human is still it's still very hard. Okay.
Yes.
Turing test hasn't been passed yet, and there is still a lot of work to do. But I think the challenge is to be realistic and identify one or two things that the AI can do in that conversation. One of them is classifying intent of the client. A second one is classifying or scoring the type of client or the type of lead if it is a sales conversation. But yeah, it's a tough one, Mark.
Yes, and I think that's why these companies are tending to specialize and really focusing in that. And there's a lot of people working on it at the moment. I've spoken to a number of companies in this area. I'm hoping to have a podcast actually with somebody again, sort of in that area, but specializing within one of the verticals, which is healthcare. What do you see as being the most exciting areas and applications of AI and machine learning at the moment? Or what areas would you like to be working on if you could work in any area or sort of within that technology?
I think one of the most exciting areas is certainly generative machine learning. So there's a bunch of companies now that are working in this area in essentially for the different type of media. We're talking here about text. Okay, that's the most straightforward use case. So for instance, let's say that you want to create a sales pitch. Okay, the AI creates that sales pitch for you, right? Let's say that, less ambitious task. You want to create 10 tweets that will resonate with your audience. You just specify a keyword and the algorithm will generate automatically those 10 tweets. All right. So there is a lot of promise for content creators, for marketers, that this technology will change their role. So instead of creators from scratch, they will become filters between the AI and their audience, filtering and selecting what is the best produce or product of the AI algorithm.
Yes.
The second and last example that I will give you in this very exciting area is video. So there are companies that are generating artificial avatars that are realistic enough to look like salespersons and salespeople, and this can be helpful in some use cases. This is still untested, unproven technology. What I mean here is that I don't know how it would react an audience in front of a fake but looking real avatar as opposed to a real person. But certainly this is very, very interesting and very exciting stuff.
I'd agree. I've seen a few examples, and they're still at their early stages, but it does hold a lot of potential. I think anywhere where we have human engagement with technology, I think where AI machine learning can help there to make that a more logical and easier process. I think that there is a lot of potential in that area. So what's for you in the future with you and Sparked? What are you aiming to do over the next few years?
More of the same, to be honest. More of the same.
So you're enjoying what you're doing now, then, obviously.
Yeah, we're just at the beginning. We get so excited and so fulfilled when we have that email from the customer saying, "Hey, we are now using the algorithm is now working. There's thousands of our clients that got X% more conversion, or now the workflow is really fixed." So again, making products better with AI is our mission, and I believe that every product in the world, especially software product, at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, will include an AI component for sure, and we are there, to play in that space.
Yeah, that's why I thought you'd be a good guest for Boss It, because we're not a generalist podcast. Our audience is software entrepreneurs, so typically there are people working with or owning or founding who have founded software companies where they may look towards you to be able to help them in a very specific area related to AI and machine learning. So you've been running Sparked for some time. You've got quite a lot of business experience as well as technical. So you've got to have those two hats on. What's the biggest and most important lesson that you've learned?
I think that technological problems are not the real problems. You can solve that. The real problems are related to typically humans either using a technology or being let down by a specific technology, and that's where my role is helping people trusting AI or helping people understanding AI so that they can then use it. That's a real challenge.
Yes, and I think we have to realize we can lose perspective a little bit, but the software industry is still a relatively new industry. It's not been around a very long time. And if you relate that to other industries, for instance, the automobile, if we say software has been around sort of 30, 40 years, the automobile industry, or for instance, televisions in that first 30 years, think about how often they went wrong. I was actually just having a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody who's sort of the same sort of age as I was and can remember color televisions coming in. But at that stage, the TV repairman, you knew him by name because the television would break down frequently and they would have to come out and fix it. Nowadays, you buy a television, you use it for 5, 6 years, it gets out at 8, you sell it or you get rid of it. They just don't go wrong as much anymore. And it's the same for cars, how reliable they are compared to in the early days. And I think with software, we're still going through that evolution of an immature industry. And we're also going through that other phase, which you see in new areas. Because I look at the software sector as a whole, but then subsectors within that, typically by technology, but not always nowadays. And what tends to happen is that the functionality is consolidated and the solutions get bigger. Mm-hmm. And it looks as though that in some ways that in the B2B area, you will have software that will help you run your company, and it does
Uh-huh.
it all. It just appears as one solution.
Uh-huh.
Whereas if you go back 10 years, we were looking at lots and lots of modules and having to sort of pull those together. You know, you went to the OCR specialists, for instance, and then you went to the, you know, the scanner hardware manufacturers, and then you would get some scanning software to be able to capture those images and clean those images and de-skew them. But now solutions are coming together with greater and greater functionality. And the M&A, you know, acquiring companies, that happens naturally, as well as the evolution of the software. And AI and machine learning is going to be very much at the core of that.
Absolutely. I mean, software consolidation has been a major trend for the last 2-3 years, at least from my perspective. And where there is consolidation, there is more data. And when there is more data, the application of AI is more straightforward. When you were saying, you were talking about, how the software industry is still relatively young. However, I might also say that, in terms of reliability, we have really seen an improvement and transition. If you think about, Windows 95 and, at that time we had to reboot computers because the operating system was crashing, right?
Yes.
Now we have apps that are very reliable. I feel like, the challenge for the next 5 to 10 years, it's on the usability side and on the security, or let's say usability and personalization side, and on the security side. And again, AI can absolutely help both in terms of usability, improving usability, but also more importantly, to make software understand their users so much better and personalize those services and solutions to a level that, could be, astonishing in some cases.
Yes. For me, to be able to improve the engagement for users with those software solutions, I think will be a real major step forward. I mean, I'm talking to executives within software companies all the time. It's when talking to them privately, I've had the conversation on quite a few occasions when talking about their own software, is they've said to me privately, I never use it. I don't even know how to use our software. It seems really complicated to me. And if you think about that, if those leaders within the business are not actually using their own solutions, there is a weakness there, because they can be very, very complex. And if you're not using them all day long and you've spent time to learn how to really understand them, I'm not talking about the more simplistic things. I mean, we all tend to be pretty good now with Word, but do we use it to its full ability? And Excel and those programs that have been around a long time, but some of these specialist applications, they can be quite complex, and anything that can be used to enable us, that steepen the learning curve, I think is what it's about, and make them much more usable, will be a real major step forward. And I think that's a very exciting area, and we'll start to see these software solutions coming into more areas of our life, but in a very positive way.
100%.
If somebody wanted to reach out to you, Lucas, it's been a fascinating conversation. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, so I've got to remind people that Sparked is SPARKD, no E, spark.ai. What's the best way to get hold of him? Is it through the website?
Yeah, through the website, or, I'm on social media everywhere, LinkedIn, Twitter, probably Twitter, Luca Marchesotti, you tweet it, and you find me there. So just DM or on LinkedIn. Okay, you find me on, I'm quite active on LinkedIn as well. So you can follow my profile, and you receive a lot of content tailored for AI enthusiasts, or also for people who want to genuinely understand more about what's going on in our industry.
Yes, super. Well, what we'll do is we'll capture your details. We tend to do a written write-up of this podcast, and we'll put all of your contact details down at the bottom anyway. I'm intending to do quite a few podcasts in this particular area, and I've got a few ideas about some things that we could do, and maybe we'll invite you back at some stage and perhaps talk about any projects you're on, or any particular areas. But thank you very much for coming on to Boss It. I appreciate your time. And I know when we've had previous conversations, you are very, very busy, and we had to reschedule this a couple of times, but thank you for today, and we'll get those details out to you.
Thank you, Mark.
That was it. That was talking to Luca about AI and machine learning. I hope you found that of interest. If there are topics that you would like me to cover, then please do get in contact. If you feel that you've got a good story to tell about your software company and your career, your experiences, then again, get a hold of me, and we'll have a chat and see if we can set something up. But in the meantime, look after yourself and stay healthy. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.